fit you. And as I mentioned beforehand, Steph's talk is now called Trust Elite. All right. Just going to switch to that. So I've known Stephanie for some time now, from having lived and worked in Melbourne. Prior to that, she lived here, and now she's back. She's been back for a little while. There we go. So she offers a wealth of experience as a business leader, product innovator, agile coach, and now specialises in business growth. She's working for a company called UI, which is a company which connects people who are tourists with local businesses, and they're in the city here in Adelaide. Her talk is going to be discussing about how high levels of trust leads to a level of what she calls magic trust. If you can achieve that, you can achieve outstanding levels of collaboration that result in high performance for individuals, teams, and organisations. So, without any more ado, here is Stephanie BySouth.
Thank you, Ed. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Johan, can you hear me? Awesome. He's going to be my Czech guy up the back. Awesome to be back in Adelaide, and thank you very much for having me here. I'm a little bit nervous, so if I pace too much, you can just go, whoa, pull it back. It's been quite a journey for me to bring all of this content together for you and to talk about what we're going to learn today. And really that is that the heart of what you achieve within business really comes down to teams. As Joanne said this morning, organisations aren't linear, and it really depends on the systems of people that you have. So what I'd love to share with you is some of the learnings over my career, which I started last century. It's been a while, and as well as coaching businesses around the place. Catch my breath. So that's me. I've been around for a while. I first started, my first business last century when I came out of uni, which was all sorts of fun. So I actually learnt to fail pretty quickly. I was an independent graphic designer, and at that stage, I didn't even have an email address, let alone a website. So it's been quite a journey to come along to get to the point to actually help businesses improve their performance. And when you talk about business performance, it's not just about money, it's actually about people, and it's very much about the products and how the products connect with people in the market. So now I call myself a business growth coach. I used to be an agile coach. Previously to that, I was head of product for a venture capitalist team. So we bought and sold businesses, helped them grow, and started with List Globally is one, Redbubble you might have heard about, Arts Hub was another one. And that was a really fun way to grow businesses, but it was also a very stressful way. Had a wonderful, wonderful team, but when you're in a VC, you're always focusing on, as Joanne said, return on investment, return on investment. And what would happen is what we'd gamble on would sometimes we'd actually miss these little gems that were bubbling away and exploring away, which is one of the reasons why my career keeps bringing me back to Adelaide. There's a really lovely, really calm confidence about the innovation that's actually happening in Adelaide at the moment. So I'm really happy to be back here and joining a startup again, even though it is a bit crazy as well. Catch my breath. So, tell me, actually, hands up if you believe our state politicians follow through on their promises, whether it's the current politicians here or win the election that's going to come up next year. Yeah, that's kind of pretty much the trend, isn't it? No one really believes or trusts our politicians anymore. And in fact, ABC's been tracking federal government promises that they've been making at state elections, and 1 in 4 promises are always broken by politicians. Now, this is interesting because what you guys represent in terms of not putting your hands up is actually the state of trust in our government in the nation. And the unfortunate news, according to Edelman, who have been studying trust around the globe for the last 20 years, is that Australia sits in the bottom 30% of trusting nations. So what that means is we don't trust the government to take care of us. We don't trust the system has our best interest in mind. In fact, we are becoming less and less trusting even of our neighbours and even in terms of what's happening in the world around us, which is really quite unfortunate. But what's happened is since we're losing faith in our governments and our society and things around us, we're actually putting more and more trust in corporations and companies. And so now more than ever, there's a higher expectation on companies and products to have our best interest in mind and to lead the way for beneficial socio-economic reform. So put your hand up if you'd love to buy a Tesla from Elon Musk. Yeah, there's a few more hands up than we'd like to buy things off our politicians. So would you still buy a Tesla off a guy who publicly smokes marijuana? Put your hand up. Actually, that was interesting. Different people put their hand up the second time. Maybe that's the reason I keep coming back to Adelaide. What's going on there? Now, the thing about Elon Musk is, I bet you $50 he used to smoke marijuana privately. But now that he's smoking marijuana publicly, he's not trusted as a CEO figure by his board. So he's actually been demoted because they don't trust that a publicly smoking marijuana dude can be responsible for $1 billion. But, you know, I'd kind of actually put $1 billion into him if I had it. So what about this engine? Hands up if you would trust this engine to safely take you down the coast and take your family for a nice holiday over the weekend. Oh, yeah, it's quite a few. What was that? Depends on the person driving. Will you be driving? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Then it's fine. But what about the makers of that engine? Now, Volkswagen own Audi. And for those of you who don't recall, a couple of years ago, Volkswagen were caught, allegedly, falsifying their carbon emissions to the industry. Allegedly, they were doing it. What happened within 48 hours of them being caught out for allegedly faking the news about their carbon emissions, their share price dropped within 48 hours, down 50%. It was absolutely phenomenal. And at the time, they came out with all this media. We didn't know what was going on. It was someone else's fault. And they weren't exactly very transparent. Now, for those of you who are car lovers, you know that Volkswagen's been dodgy around a number of things. And for those of you who don't, their gearbox, the DSG gearbox, is also caught up in a lot of court controversy for causing deaths on the road. Stanford University calculated, because of the falsification that Volkswagen did over the years, is that there's a probability they have caused the deaths of 5 people around the world. Allegedly, just saying. So the thing is that while some products are worth trusting, some companies aren't worth trusting, and it really comes down to how they behave. So we now have a high expectation for companies to have our best interest at heart. Now, if we look at the way that the CEO of Volkswagen handled it, basically, last month, he's been put under house arrest for fraud. So he is still blaming lower management and saying senior executives had no idea what was going on. Of course we wouldn't do that. Yeah, right. But last month, he was busted because he was ringing up people saying, let's work out our testimony. Let's try and get through this. So he's still trying to bullshit consumers. But we don't stand for that anymore. We don't trust those kind of CEOs. Whereas you look on the other hand, Nike. Do you remember Nike had all the issues in their factories around third world working conditions and things like that? Every pretty much company around the world suffers from these same things. Nike got caught out, which was a good thing. And the difference between, if I can say his name, Winter Conton and Phil Knight, was that Phil Knight stood up as the CEO and said, you know what, I own this company, I run this company, I take full accountability. I'll open all our doors to journalists, to media, to independent audit reporters. And off they went. And ever since then, they took accountability for the problems that they had. They improved the working conditions to global standards. And still to this day, they have independent auditors go in. You can jump on their website and see transparently what's happening in their factories. So you have full accountability as a consumer to be conscious of how your products are being made. Now, the two key differences between these guys is Phil Knight, just a few weeks ago, donated $1 billion to charity, just gave it away. And he kind of said, well, you know, before I die, I plan to give the other $30 billion away. Like, incredible. This guy's stuck in his house stressed out, and his poor wife has to take care of him because he's just been arrested for fraud. So what's happening in our world is that we have an expectations on CEOs and companies to take care of us unlike we've expected before. And this means that it comes down to who we are and how we behave as companies is no longer just about the bottom line. The payoffs that's happening, well, actually, before we get to the payoffs, one of the things that any of the CEO reports have said, so there's global CEO reports by PwC, Deloitte, the Edelman Global Trust Barometer, they all rank building trust as one of the #1 priorities of a CEO and a company today. And this is actually over delivering high quality products. Because like Knight, they didn't necessarily always deliver high quality products, but they always had a high rate of conversation with their consumers and said, we're exploring, trust us. We'll keep going. And out of that, they built a global corporation. So what this means for our products as well, when we do deliver products, if you think about trust, it can be an intangible thing, but if consumers or users trust your product or service, then you get an 82% repeat users, which is phenomenal if you think from an income point of view. 83% of them will refer onto someone else, which is absolutely fabulous if you expect some kind of growth rate in your business or your performance from there. So having a trusted brand and a trusted product makes a big difference. You think Volkswagen would have worked that out by now? Go figure. Can you tell I don't really like them? Oops. So there's some really great research that's done out there. And the Thinking High Performance white paper, which has been done, I think it's one of the top 4 consultancies. I won't say it because they're my competitors. Nonetheless, they've been able to prove that high-performing teams, so those that are superior to elite, have almost twice as much the financial impact as what is just functional or productive teams. And the key difference between those teams is the level of trust that they have within it of each other and how trusted those teams are to deliver the outcomes for the business. So I'll have a drink while you consume that for a sec. I'm thirsty. It's all that moaning about VW made me thirsty. Note to self, don't have fizzy drinks, it might make you burp. All right, I put this up, it's a big slide, so we'll take a bit of time with it, but it's really quite important because the power of trust threads through everything that we do. It's kind of tangible, it's intangible, it's who we are, it's how we connect, and it's actually how we rate people and how we actually measure whether we even hire people. Inferior teams. Has anyone been on an inferior team? Put your hand up. No, I won't say put your hand up now if you're in one, because your boss might be here. I did that once and my boss was in the room. You should see my face went really red. The thing about these is that you just don't trust each other. You know, you constantly have to check each other, constantly have to control. And the thing that they need to grow is just connection, a connection to the outcomes, because often inferior teams just don't give a shit. You know, they turn up, they don't give a shit, they get the salary and off they go. Functional teams, which is very much around a lot of agile teams are put together around their functional skills and capability. And that's really nice. I can get a drummer, bass player, I can get a guitarist, I can get a singer. Doesn't mean they're going to make music. And it actually doesn't mean they're going to make music that people are going to pay to see either. And so the thing that functional teams is they kind of have this doubt. They don't have experience with each other and they don't get a flow in terms of their productivity. Productive teams is we're actually getting there. Like they're ones that are really worthy of having around. They're ones that are worthy of each other. Oh, there you go. And then superior teams are those that actually commit to a purpose and they're well respected. You know, have you ever seen those teams that are really well respected? In fact, who's been in a superior team? Who would say? Yeah, we've got a few people. It's pretty awesome when you're hanging out with those sort of people and getting to work in with them every day. And then an elite team, they have this revered aura that's around them. And an elite team, one of my favourites is obviously, for those of you like rugby union, the game they play in heaven, is the All Blacks. And so they have this unconscious bias that pulls them towards their purpose, but they also have this unconscious practice where they pre-anticipate what their teammate's going to do. And you can't pay for that kind of speed. That comes with repetition, exploration, it comes with practice, and it also comes with being driven to succeed. So they're big differences. And the one thing that is consistent, regardless of your skills, your culture, your diversity, your company, everything else, is the thread of whether they trust each other or whether they build a trustworthiness, respect from everyone else in their company. It's quite a mouthful, isn't it? But it's worth thinking about in terms of how you want to grow your teams. Now, the thing is that in studying trust, what is it? Because the thing that I find is like, do I trust you? Do I not trust you? Is it the hairs on the back of my neck? Or, you know, I just don't like what that person's wearing. Nah, don't trust them. Doing the research and interviewing people, it was really interesting because everyone talked a lot about characteristics and behaviours: accountable, integrity, reliable. And it's like, yeah, I value all of those things, but if I needed a guy to break into my car, I'd trust him to break in my car, but I don't necessarily trust that he's genuinely reliable, has integrity, or is accountable for anything else. So we need trust for different situations and for different moments. And for me, it was all about trust is really the measure of connection between us. How connected are we as people? But it's also the currency of our worthiness to other people. So I consider you trustworthy because you're a good driver. So you are worthy of driving my family. I consider your team worthy of delivering this product because you deliver consistently. And it really is something that we have within each other. So coming down to that, it was how do I help teams then to build trust, other than the kind of typical games that you might hear about. And what came up in the research and then working with the teams was helping to understand what are the indicators that either move me towards trusting someone or the indicators that actually indicate that person cannot be trusted. So we go from a state of distrust, kind of ambivalent, to trusting someone else. And so it's really quite interesting. So evidence, so that is something, what do we know about the situation or the person? The environment, so the physical environment is a big contributor. Our experience in the situation. So say, for example, nervous flyers. If you've never flown in a helicopter before, you may not trust it. But the more experience that you have with that helicopter, the more likely you are to trust flying at high speeds and so forth. Energy, which is one of these intangible things. You know, trust can be just as intangible as it can be tangible. Exploration, which Joanne talked about this morning, and emotion. And emotion tends to be this kind of, let's not go there. We don't talk about emotion at work, but we're going to talk about it today. So let's dive into some of these trust indicators and learn how agile teams actually generate overcoming distrust and barriers in each of these indicators to build their productivity. Have a drink. Who knows how many requests they have in their inbox? Who's got more than 20? Okay, you guys can go off and catch up on your work. With Agile, have you heard of Kanban? Yeah, everyone's heard of Kanban? So it means visual signboard in Japanese, and it's absolutely fantastic. Because what happens is the unfortunate paradox of the digital world is while it's speeding things up, it's also created this curtain of hidden information. So you guys have no idea how many requests are coming to me individually versus having one wall where we visualise the work with the team. And what happens is that I can't necessarily trust what's going on because I have to scroll back through emails, like nothing worse than Gmail's inline emails at the moment with a team of 10 and you're all emailing it back with their conversations and it's like, oh man, Bob said that, but hang on, that was before what Mary said, so is that actually still relevant? And it's like, you know what guys, we're 2 metres away, let's have a chat. No, seriously, that happens. The thing about walls is that it allows the team to make everything visual and it gives the team a space to make it about the work versus the people, particularly with management. Because management will send an email off, they're disconnected from the team. But if you bring your manager to the wall, then that evidence helps to build trust because it's transparent and it's not hidden and it saves time. Now, emotion as an indicator of whether we trust people and we can build trust within a team is really quite important. It's actually the one universal language that we share regardless of what's going on. So if I smile, that's a bit of a cheesy smile, wasn't it? But if you smile at someone, everyone knows that you're pretty much happy. And we're finally cotton on to the fact that if we work out whether customers love our products, love, that's emotion, or they hate our products, that's an emotion, or they're unsatisfied, that's a type of emotion, then it's an indicator in terms of whether they trust our brand or they trust our product. But somehow we're too scared to talk about emotions in the workplace. And teams are people, so people have emotions all the time, but we tend to mute. We never ask them, well, how are you feeling about that? Are you feeling good? Are you feeling unhappy? The thing is, it's just energy and motion, and it's something that we all share, and it's actually really quite important to talk about. So in Agile and with Agile teams, using visual evidence and cues, you can start to bring that emotion and energy to life. This is one of my favourite. You kind of have to have a little bit of courage when you put the elephant up on the wall and say, right, let's start to talk about the elephant in the room. Because what's going to happen is people are going to put their big problems up there. And I highly recommend that you make sure it's a safe space first before you do put it up there. But allowing people to talk through what they feel and just to let that emotion go means that it creates the capacity for the team to then work together. So it basically gets us out of ourselves. The other thing that emotion is, if it's energy and motion, it's actually an expression of what we personally value. And so when you bring people together and put them in a teams, we all have different values. Like I'm actually quite a high performer and I value honesty. I hate people that actually drop each other into the doo-doo, if that's the way that you say it. And so when people cross my boundaries, I get passionately upset about that. I'm a very passionate person to the point that my team actually did a printout that said open when grumpy, because they know that when I'm upset and when it opens, it's got a picture of Leroy, my golden retriever. So it's a way that my team's been able to communicate to me, like, we know you're upset, but hey, let's talk about this. But this one that we've got here, this is a retrospective that we do with teams. And if you have a look up on the left, you see the scale from 1 to 5, and it says safe talk. So we start our retrospectives by saying, on a scale of 1 to 5, how safe do you feel to have a conversation with this team? So 1, hell no. Not going there. 2, maybe. 3, sure, but I need support. 4, yeah, pretty much, but maybe not with Bob. And 5, totally open to it. So if you're a leader or you're a team leader, or even if you're doing this with your team, ask them that question. Have everyone write the number down on a sticky, fold it so it's anonymous, because we don't want to expose anyone, and then see where your team rates. And it's really quite interesting of what comes up, because if the team doesn't feel safe to talk about what's going on and talk through things, it doesn't matter what you do in your retrospective. Having a retrospective about how our process is doing, it's not going to make a big difference. It's not going to help you overcome that inferior barriers to becoming a more productive team. And then the retrospective that's on the right is called a timeline one. So these guys felt safe. They were around an average to 4. And then a timeline retrospective is just what happened and then what was the impact of that. And it's a really nice way to start to open up and see how safe your team feel, to really dig down into what's happening with your team rather than just going, yeah, you know, I think we should do our planning a bit better. Cool, let's get coffee first. So experience as an indicator. This, down the bottom, I thought this was really lovely. So experience comes from the Latin word experientia, which is knowledge gained by repeated trials. I thought it was quite lovely because somehow in this digital world of perfection and media and beautiful people, we've forgotten that learning is just through experience and trying it out. And that's what it is. And so the interesting thing about this for agile teams is we force feedback sooner. So through Scrum and your iterative cycles, it forces you to learn faster. Because at the end of a Scrum sprint, you're saying, how do we do? How can we improve? And that's the key difference between businesses that will succeed and businesses that don't, is I actually look at what is their rate of learning. So what is the cycle time between them stuffing something up and then fixing that stuff up? And it's quite interesting. So I'll walk into companies and they'll have a learning rate of, say, 2 years. And then my sole goal is to get them to break that in half to 1 year, to 6 months, to quarterly, to then every 6 weeks, down to 3 weeks. And if you can get a company to learn at a faster rate, it actually doesn't matter what else you're doing, because then they're taking ownership and they're improving their learning rate. So experience. The thing about experience and then annual feedbacks is that we don't learn fast enough, or we forget that experience, or we hold on to the emotion that upset us. You know what? I'm so sick of him not checking his own code because everyone else has to check his code. And then you get into the review and you say, look, the impact on you is that you really don't have tidy code. It's actually quite bad, and then the cost of that is in testing in here. Whereas if you have that conversation with that person in terms of their behaviour before it impacts or when it impacts people, it allows them the opportunity to immediately correct, and it minimises the cost of those bumps that they create for the team. Can you guys see that? It's a bit... I know there's a few competitors in the room, so I kind of had to block a few things out. The third one down says, buy Steph coffee before 12 and gin after 12. Let's see if the pointer works. Oh, yay! Okay, so what we have up here, this is $26 million worth of work up here, right in front of us. This is a large portfolio program in one of the big 4 banks. I won't say which one. And we had 130 people on the program of work, so 11 teams, one kind of what we called leadership team. So yeah, one for leadership team for 10 teams. And then we had executives from the business side joining that portfolio team. So it was very much a team of teams, just to give you some context. On the left here we've got 6 of our teams which focused on one aspect of the program. And then we got the leadership team at top. So the experience that this portfolio had to create efficiency and productivity was that these teams would have their stand-ups between 9 and 10 in the morning, depending on, when they came in, how much coffee they needed, all of that kind of stuff. Any blockers, issues that they had would come to this Scrum of Scrums board. A Scrum of Scrums would happen around 11 o'clock. And so that would have a Scrum Master, we'd have a rep from each of the team would turn up to the Scrum of Scrums, as well as the entire leadership team. And we'd also have like our DevOps, we'd have our security, we'd have our risk management and our compliance people turn up as well. So what that meant, if this team had an issue, there was a sponsor or an advocate, or there were the right people an hour and a half later to help them solve that issue. Then what would happen, every Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 12 o'clock, so an hour later, we'd have the GM product owners, so sponsors of that program, and the executive GMs from the business side, who are responsible for spending the $26 million, turn up to find out what was happening with their portfolio of work. So every Monday, Wednesday and Friday, they'd come to a stand-up. And then down here, the business Scrum of Scrums that was also Monday, Wednesday and Thursday, because executives tend to go drink on a Friday night. They would actually get together at 5 o'clock that evening. So what that meant, because it's an extremely high priority. This was a home buying portfolio. So it's $1 billion industry, and every dollar that you're not in the market is $10 lost. And so what they did is they all huddled around this board at some point within a 24-hour period to solve the team's problems, to validate the priorities that had to get to market, to qualify the product expectations that were there, to qualify in terms of what's the risk and compliance that we're going to do. It was quite incredible. Like, it was a really, really highly productive portfolio team of teams. The thing is, it didn't take a day to get there. It took actually probably 18 months, one of teaching everyone agile, teaching everyone Scrum, Kanban, working out what cumulative flow is, building the culture. This leadership team, we did some quite intensive coaching with them around their behaviour and being able to lead this kind of portfolio of work. But what came out of it was a shared accountability to get the job done and get to market. Now, in the same way that it was a $26 million portfolio of expenses, what it generated in return was 4 times that. And also because what we didn't put into the market meant that we saved them a lot of money as well. And that is a great experience of an elite team working together with executive directors, executive GMs, and so forth. The other indicator to be mindful of is your environment. And with offshore teams, one of the things, just checking, how are we going for time? One of the things with environment that we forget is that it breaks down trust, it breaks down communication and connection, so there becomes this doubt. So having retrospectives without being able to see each other face to face actually creates this kind of corrosion of doubt. Did they really say that? What did they actually mean? I don't understand it. What does it matter? We'll sort it out this side of fence. And it's fascinating because these guys love their rooms that they had, because we could zoom into their stickies, see them face to face, work together wall to wall. Where we were, so that's me in there taking a photo, the camera is facing the team, but they can't see the stickies that we come up. So this kind of hidden information needs to be translated, needs to take time, and we don't have that transparency to communicate and get along. And it's very hard to build trust if your environment isn't conducive to sharing and being visible. The other thing, which I think is a great story, is that how you set up your teams can make a huge difference. So has everyone heard of Pixar? You know, the animation, Toy Story, Steve Jobs, revolutionary, all that stuff. When they first set up their startup, they had a big room, It's a big room, big desk, lots of people in, collaborate, let's go. But what happened, they had so many people in the room around this one big desk, is that the senior people kept going to the centre because they were old, couldn't hear each other, and everyone started to have to sit around the outside. And it became this kind of Game of Thrones and hierarchy to get as close to the creative director as possible. And then someone actually started to put place cards because the art director had come in, can't talk to anyone, can't do anything. And then the interns were kind of stuck up the back of the room going, I have an idea. And they kept saying, oh, we're an inclusive collaborative society. I have an idea. Shut up, you're in the corner, you don't even get a seat. And it wasn't until one of their creative directors realised there was this unintentional politics that they created, and he ripped up all the placards, cut the table in half, made it a square one, and it changed the entire dynamic of the group. So often we think that we're being intentionally collaborative, putting posters up, yay! But if we don't consider the environment and what's actually forcing people to do, then we're unintentionally excluding them, and that breaks down trust. Not only you as a manager, if you set up that room, but the ability to connect to each other. How are we doing for time, Ed?
5 minutes.
Okay, for me to talk or questions? Everything. Oh my God, okay. I'll shut up then. So the other one is exploration. Really quite important. Safe, courage and unsafe. Really quite simple. For those of you who have babysitted kids or take care of kids, you can be out to 9:30, that's safe. Between 9:30 and 10:30, gonna need a lot of courage because I don't really quite trust you. After 10:30, nah, totally unsafe. You can't be out with your mates. And it's the same with teams. We try to control them into this safe space of predictability, but we have to have the courage to let them explore and to go into unsafe grounds, because that's where innovation comes from. So I was going to tell you a story about a girl and two guys who were ringing up the ladies' toilets with wiring and a letter, but we're running out of time. Nonetheless, the thing that hackathons do is that they allow companies to let their teams explore, have the courage to let your teams do a hackathon and explore. And this was brilliant. This was at Seek for their hackathons, and we did wire up the toilet cubicles, not because of what some of you are thinking, but because they got so busy we needed to indicate when they were in use or not. So energy. Energy is the other one in terms of flow. For me, it's quite binary. You either contribute, you're going with the stream and the flow, or you're competing. So that means you're stopping that flow and creating friction. And the thing about energy, and we think of superior teams versus those inferior teams, is that you notice that they have this great dynamic. There's a vibrancy about it versus inferior teams that are kind of like, I'll contribute, but I think I might have cheese for lunch first. You know, it's a different thing in terms of the teams and how they flow and work together. So my favourite quote, one of my favourite quotes around teams is Steve Jobs. I know, he keeps coming up. And I think that's beautiful. The sum of the parts is greater. They balanced each other and the total was greater than the sum of the parts. So for me, being an Australian and who likes to put society first and not so fussed about first right amendments, I don't say individuals and interactions, I say teams and outcomes over processes, because there is no way I could achieve what I do without the people and the teams that I work with. Absolutely brilliant people. If you're interested in building trust within your teams, here's a few good books. Speed of Trust is quite good, particularly good for managers who need to build up some evidence around the quantifiable difference that investing in trust in teams makes. The Decisions book, sometimes we just can't decide. How can I trust a situation? The Decision book's a really good way for finding those visual models to help you build trust. 5 Dysfunctions of the Team, excellent if you're in that kind of inferior to just functional state. Multipliers, another really nice one for anyone, not just a manager, but anyone who wants to lead improvement performance in their area. And for some reason, I put Adam Brown's book up. Normally, I'll put a biography. But Adam Brown, his story is a story about trust in himself beyond the expectation of what we normally think trust is, and then what he achieved with his SEAL teams. I have a soft spot for that, and if anyone's actually interested in talking about how Agile can help people with PTSD, come find me after. Lean Debate. If anyone's heard of Lean Debate or the game, really good way to break down barriers, break down distrust, and build a cohesive team. And then there's me. Hopefully I'm a bit of a trust builder. Better to get me before gin hour. And that's it. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. I think we've got a couple of minutes for questions. That's it.
Thanks, Steph.
Thanks.
Okay, so who's got a question for Stephanie? I'll start off by... Oh, okay.
So with that bank engagement, the $26 million portfolio, you said it took 18 months to establish that process. At what level were you brought in at? Was it with the senior executive team to begin with, or was it someone further down who wanted to promote this way of working?
I personally was brought in just as an Agile coach to work on the portfolio. So generally the term for those kind of coaches is Agile Enterprise Coach. Which kind of means jack shit, really, other than the fact that you can talk to big corporations and work with team of teams. From there, because I kind of call things as it is, I was then pulled up to work with the digital directors team and the IT enterprise services team. And the reason that I was pulled up was because I became someone that they could trust. And the reason for that is I give leaders a safe place to learn, which is really quite important. But there was also a team of teams. There was an entire Agile coaching team that was put into their digital department and then loaned out to IT services and then loaned out to business. So trust was built in Agile through the experience that they had, iteration on iteration. Good question.
Okay, we'll go for one more. There's one over there.
Big throw, Ed. Oh!
So in case it doesn't work.
Okay, we're going to play lawn bowls later, and Ed's not on my team.
It's hard to grip.
You're talking about that safe talk scale. What do you do if your team has a low score?
A low score? One, I'd be going in, know that they're probably going to have a low score, and have an independent facilitator who can help. A really good technique that I have done with teams that have a low score is to actually use the empathy map. Has anyone heard of the empathy map? Just Google it, empathy map, and it's this nice A3 sheet of paper that has a smiley face in the centre that says feel, hear, say, do, pains and gains. And then what I do is I have them write their name down. So Steph, what do I do? All of the above. And then I say, okay, pass that on to the person next to you. And then so I say to the person next to me, you need to write down what you think that person feels, says and do in their job. What are the expectations on them? What are their stresses and pains? And so literally it's a controlled coaching situation where you get people to step into other people's shoes and it breaks down their barriers. That's one thing in terms of controlled coaching. The second thing is play more games. Just play more games with each other. So play, the opposite of play isn't work. It's actually depression. And so there's a whole other theory that's around that. And play helps us to test things out. It tests our boundaries. Remember how you used to play with your brothers? You'd punch them and then go, oh no, that's too far. So find a safe way to play, and that really helps build that score up.
Thank you. That's all we've got time for questions. So please give Steph a round of applause. Okay.